Hello, my name is Dr. Patricia Crane, and I am excited today to be talking with Stef Swink Morrison. Stef offers her gifts to the world as an inspirational speaker, in individual sessions, as a practitioner and spiritual mentor, offering retreats, and also just with her wonderful column for the last 6 years in the Guide for Spiritual Living Science of Mind magazine. And I know I read that magazine every single month. But most of all, Stef is a lover of life, and her enthusiasm and the way that she shares in the world really shows you that. I first met Stef when she was working for Louise and ultimately became the ghostwriter for Louise. And then Rick and I, my husband, were very fortunate to have Stef working for us for a few years before she went on to all the other exciting things that she's doing with her career now. So she really inspires people to live the life that they love, and we are excited to listen to her today. So, Stef, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. One thing I read in your bio was that you actually were brought up with spiritual principles, and that's very different from most of the people that I talk to. So, how did that impact you, and ultimately, what led you to where you are today?
Well, I have my mother to thank for raising me with spiritual principles. One could say that she was a beautiful hippie when I was a, and she really instilled in me a deep appreciation for nature, for one, and as far as spirituality, she really started to explore that more on her own when my parents divorced when I was just 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so on her journey, I watched and listened and watched her blossom and change. So I would say that, I remember coming to her, I was thinking about this question earlier. I remember coming to her as a teenager. A lot of my friends at the time I was a young teen, but they were involved in the churches that they grew up in and different philosophies. And I was exploring.
Mm-hmm.
And I admit that I was a little bit envious of what seemed like such a solid, firm foundation of belief.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my mother's answer to what is God was, I remember it distinctly, was God is love, God is everywhere and inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I would say I very much resonate with that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I needed something a little more to hold on to. But she really opened the door for that, and it has her openness and her curiosity really impacts even how I live now. Just being very open and curious and not steadfast in one particular way of seeing things.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think many of us would wish for a mom like that, actually.
Pretty
Now,
lucky.
you also mentioned that when you were 8, you had a spiritual experience. And what was that like? And how does that impact you?
Well, that was amazing. Around 8.
Wow.
I always, my love in life, all my life has been, excuse me, my animals and being. And I was down at the little park down the street from where I grew up, summer day, lying in the grass on my back with my 2 dogs nearby. And at one point it was I can remember the sunshine and how it felt and just how safe and comfortable I felt. And what happened was I could feel my fingers became the blades of grass.
Wow.
And I could feel then that expand. I mean, I felt like I was personally experiencing what it was like to be the tree that I could see, and the leaves blowing in the wind. It was an absolute exquisite experience of oneness. And I rose above the tree and was viewing myself and the dogs and the little lake. And it was so beautiful. And the only thing that brought me back was I was surprised. What is this moisture in my ears? And from my tears, there were tears there. And just that thought, brought me back. And I remember just staying there. And even though I was so young, my memory's so clear that it felt absolutely bliss is the best word to describe it.
Wow.
There was an absolute sense of connection, oneness, safety, and certainty wasn't all that prevalent in my physical world at the time.
Right. Yeah.
So it was beautiful. And
It's beautiful.
yeah. And you asked, how does that impact me now? I would say that even when life or, the experience of being a human being in this world at this time, it's got lots of things that can rattle us and shake us and cause us to be afraid. That memory sticks with me, and I can tap into it, not quite the same way, but in my spiritual practice, I can get into that place and remember.
Wow, that's lovely. Yeah. Now, we are talking about life purpose, and what do you consider your life purpose now, and has that changed over the years?
I love that question, because the honest question is, oh yes, it's changed over. and even looking back of when I was working for Louise and working for you, I was definitely motivated from a more, I would say, not in a judgmental kind of way, but in a more self-focused, like I was frightened, or I was insecure, or I was longing for things. So I was looking for answers and a way of being that was more comfortable within myself. And so, that when I very first started working for Louise, I lost my best friend. Right. Suddenly and tragically. I mean, literally the day before I started working for Louise.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what has changed, though, from that more individual focus, longing for something different for myself, I started to find that sense of fulfillment through working with other people when I became a practitioner and when I became a Louise teacher, as we called it back in the day. Yeah. And what has changed, I would say, from that is that I'm much more solid in who I am and my own sense of self and in the world. And my focus is, I find my deep fulfillment in really supporting others in waking up to their own, to the fulfillment. And so through my mentoring, that is the primary focus of my work and my ministry now. Yeah. Working with individuals who are really committed. And I love that. And so I would say that's my purpose. If I can help people realize the beauty within themselves and how extraordinary life is and how much they can love it, then I'm on target.
Well, and you mentioned being a spiritual practitioner, and I know you have been since 1999. So for those listening who may not understand what that is, why don't you explain a little bit about being a spiritual practitioner and what motivated you to become one initially?
Well, a spiritual practitioner, I got my training and my license through the Centers for Spiritual Living. And so it's a national organization. It's also where Louise, she was involved. She was a practitioner. And so that segues beautifully into why I did that, why I embarked on that training. I met Louise. I met some other people who were practitioners when I started going to a spiritual center. And the minister there also, Reverend Kathy Hearn, became a friend. And these women, I was massively impressed by them and how they lived and how they seemed to be women of integrity and strength and certainty. And so I want that. I want to emulate those qualities that I see in these amazing women, and a big part of the motivation.
Well, that's great. That's wonderful. And going on, how did you actually meet Louise and get hired by her? I'm not sure I know that.
And that was an interesting story. I was working actually on staff at Reverend Kathy Hearn's church center in San Diego. And I released that position. I knew it was time for something else. I didn't know what I was going to do. It was one of those big leaps of faith. And I ended up going to Sedona with a friend of mine, met another woman there who was a practitioner. She was my friend's practitioner. And she was a personal friend of Louise Hayes. And I shared with her about where I was in my life and my history. And she said, I'm going to call her and tell her she needs to meet you. And so that's how that came to be. She was in need of another personal assistant. And she had one and she needed another. Louise did. And I walked in the door and that became my role.
I love these synchronicities that happen. You know, divine guidance is right there. We know they're not coincidences. So I know you were with Louise for quite a while. And then how did you actually become her ghostwriter? And I'm very familiar with Louise's, book, Letters to Louise, and also that she had the column in Science of Mind magazine for a number of years.
She did. This is gonna date me a little bit.
Well, we're okay.
But when I was working for her in her home office, there was no email.
Right. I remember those days.
These women must be ancient. What do you mean no email?
Oh dear.
Not long ago. So she received her letters. People wrote her what we call snail mail now, right? So she received a handful of letters or more every week, and she would read them, and sometimes she would respond herself, but she started handing them to me. She would ask me, she literally would ask me, what do you think? How would you answer that? And I answered a few and gave them back to her, and well, it was more than a few weeks of doing that. Would look at them and give me her feedback, and then she said, "You're good. You're my." And that's how that came to be.
And that sounds exactly like Louise. Okay, you're good.
Yep, you're on. Go for it.
And of course, Rick and I were thrilled to have you train as a Heal Your Life workshop leader and work with us for a period of time. And we totally appreciated all that you gave of yourself and your wisdom at that time as well. So just, another really important question, and I think this is a good one for people listening who see where you are today and hear some of how you got there, which is wonderful. But we know that regardless of how many affirmations or meditation or prayer, whatever you do, that challenges come along that you have to deal with in life. So what would you like to share about a challenge that was really, difficult for you, and how you dealt with it and used your spiritual practices and what you knew at the time to get through it?
Well, the most significant one clearly was the loss of my first husband from cancer. His name was North McKinnon. And, talk about pulling out every spiritual tool you can think of. We went through such a journey. He was with that diagnosis and subsequent treatment for 1.5 years before he passed away. And we married at the encouragement of Marianne Williamson, actually, who through some circles, and she did a fundraiser talk for him, and she said, "What are you waiting for?" So we married close to Christmas.
I was there. I don't know if you remember, but I was there actually. Yes, and it was cold, and
it was cold and windy in San Clemente, California. It was a wild day and a beautiful day, and so 7 months later, he passed away. And so your question about what spiritual tools did I use to get through that? Honestly, I will say, during the thick of it, the hardest parts of it, the most difficult segments of his illness, it was very dramatic. He had his eye removed. The cancer was in his sinus cavity. I mean, it was very dramatic. What I found that I did that was so powerful was I leaned on other people. I really trusted and leaned on my friends, my spiritual community. And because there's been times, and subsequently I'm remarried, and my current husband almost died 2 years ago. And I did the same thing. I can pray. I would pray, but I was also so laser focused on the situation at hand that I asked and allowed the people who loved and supported us to hold space for us. And that was really, really important. That might surprise some people. We think, oh, well, you really, you move more into prayer and affirmations, but I'm just going to be very honest and say that I'm terrified, and my husband, who I love, might die or dies. I'm not always able to go right into a deep practice. It's kind of survival mode.
And I think that's really important, especially for women, to hear that, because I think too often women, even who aren't necessarily on a spiritual path, feel like they have to handle everything themselves and don't, recognize how many other people love them and they can reach out. And I know, at the training, sometimes when we ask, if someone asked you to support them and you could do it, emotionally or whatever, would you do it? And everybody raises their hand. And then we ask, and do you ever ask? And most of them go, no, because they don't necessarily feel worthy or feel like they ought to do it themselves. So I think your sharing is really important for women to understand that, you do have friends. There are people you can reach out to, and it's really important.
And it's really a gift to them. One of the people that I mentor with very recently lost her husband, and very recently. And so in our conversation before and during his passing, and then after, this very similar conversation is there. My encouragement of her is keep reaching out, keep accepting support, because it's a blessing for those who give it. All those women who raise their hands said, of course I'd be there, because
right.
It serves us to be in service very often.
Yeah.
And so allow people to give you that gift.
And you went on quite a journey after North passed. Although you ultimately landed in Colorado, right?
Yes. Quite a journey. Yeah. A long one. I mean, I went on fulfilled a dream, actually, after his passing. I had an extraordinary relationship. I feel very blessed. And he asked me what I was going to do when he was gone. And I halfway jokingly said, I'm out of here. And he said, I know that's a dream of yours to go travel, just travel across the country. He said, why don't you do it? And that's exactly what I did. I bought a motor, packed up all my stuff and my little dog, and drove across the country.
And your little dog is right next. One of them is right next to you now.
His subsequent pet. Subsequent partner.
Okay. Yeah. So now in your current life now, what are your daily spiritual practices?
I love this timing of this question. I did a retreat a couple of months ago, just before Christmas. And that facilitator said, when we change, our spiritual practice changes. Oh. And that there can be something really powerful in not being so rigid with our routine, although routine can be very helpful in spiritual practice. Yeah. So mine has changed a bit. It's in time, and I will say chanting is somewhat new to me to do that. And I discovered that it's a wonderful way recently to really quiet my mind, my mind down. And so I begin now I sit down in my little spot that's just behind me here, and I light a candle, and I do a chant along with a recording. I chant 15 minutes, quiet, and for a little while, however long, and I do some reading and a little journaling and some prayer. And that's my current formula right now.
Sounds wonderful.
Sounds pretty nice.
Yeah.
It is pretty nice.
Do you have any favorite affirmations that you like to use, or any favorite focus with affirmations?
The name of my ministry is Loving Life Services. And it has been that since I became a practitioner 24 years ago now. And it's all about I know, isn't that amazing? It's all about loving life. And I thought about that. What is the affirmation that I say so consistently? And it is this, that I love my life. And I have added in even the tough parts.
Okay.
And life loves me back. I love my life, even the tough parts, and life loves me back.
And I know that one of Louise's favorites was Life Loves Me. She always used that as well. So with all the things that you're doing now, is there any particular activity that's sort of your favorite? It may be hard to choose, but is there any one that's your favorite that you feel the most fulfilled with?
I love what I'm doing with mentoring in my ministry, and that shifted in a very focused, very committed kind of way for me a little over a year ago. So mentoring is the people that I work with we move into a sacred agreement together as mentee and mentor. And so it's very committed. It's this really juicy, rich opportunity to really, really know these people that I work with and to build a profound trust. So I love that. And I also have my own mentor for years and years and years. So between that sacred work and spending time in the barn, I'll get the chickens and the goats.
You have chickens and goats? Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yes, we do. And so it's still animal.
So still great.
Life activity. It's still, I find much joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember that you were very dedicated in Orange County to the animal shelter there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, when you are doing the questions, answering the questions that come into you from, different people in the Science of Mind magazine, and I will say that is one of the first, if not the first column I read every month. And
thank you.
Well, your answers are just very deep and very wise. They go to the core of what the person is asking. And so my question there is, how do you prepare to answer those questions that come into you?
It's very similar to how I prepare before I move into a session, either, with an individual or to facilitate a retreat. And this has been the same from when I was a brand new practitioner. I have a very clear intention to show up fully, but also get out of the way. And, and oftentimes in my opening prayer, when I'm with someone or facilitating a group, will be, I appreciate my own good ideas and I'm willing to set them aside.
Okay.
and so I'm really, I go into a meditative place where I call downloading. I do it before every session. I do it before I write the column. I'll take the question that I've chosen and I'll just move into a meditative state and I will ask this infinite, wise, universal presence speak through me. And oftentimes I'm surprised about what comes out. And I really value that because then I know that it's not just my own good idea.
Right. Well, and I can really feel that space that you go into when I read the answers to those questions. So that's wonderful to share with people. And then finally, what kind of advice or sharing would you like to have for women who are feeling unfulfilled, maybe at the moment, or just trying to figure out, even though they want to be of service, where do I go? What kind of advice would you share with them to inspire them?
It might sound a little overdone in the world to say this phrase, but there's something so important about putting ourselves closer to the top of our priority list. And so even though you say, women, what would I say to women who might be wondering how they can be of more service? It is not to respond in that kind of habitual way that so many Western, especially, maybe not especially, but certainly, the first thing to do is to add more to our to-do list.
Right. Yeah.
The column I'm writing right now is about somebody whose husband is challenging her about how kind of addicted she is to her to-do list.
Oh, wow.
And so, and I can relate to say that. So I would say that it's really to give ourselves a little bit of space of the not knowing, that not knowing, and not having a real clear answer right now. Okay. Yeah. Move into a place of tender curiosity. And asking, rather than trying to find what it is that is mine to do to feel free. Yeah. It's to go within instead.
Right. Yeah.
Right inside and say, what does my soul want? Yeah. What does my heart want to do, to feel, to be, and follow that guidance.
And just really to ask for that guidance, absolutely. Because at some level of your being, you were asking for more when you were introduced to Louise Hay. Right? So,
very much so.
And those beautiful synchronicities are just so wonderful. So, Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing this time with me and for sharing it with the audience that's going to be listening to this. I just want to say that if you would like to see more about Stef, you can go stefswink.com. And also, she is absolutely open to you sending your questions to her because she loves answering those. And who knows, you might end up being in the magazine with anonymously, of course, with the answer to your question. But I really encourage you to follow up with her, get on her mailing list, and just connect in with the wisdom that Stef has to share. And also, her love of life will absolutely inspire you. And so it is.
So it is. Thank you, Patricia.